Welcome to Meditation Mount and another view from the Mount broadcast. We are gathered in different parts of the world. So what we normally do is to gather ourselves together to begin this journey. So let us do that by entering the silence of the heart, by closing our eyes, and making sure that our body is relaxed and free from any tension. We are mindful of our breathing, breathing in relaxation and breathing out any residual tension. And we do the same with our emotions, with our feelings. We allow them to become calm and still. And we allow the mind to be free of all extraneous thought, for it to become still, serene, and empty to receive. And then we focus on our heart and stand inside the heart, becoming aware of its beating. And we visualize at the center of our heart a flame. This is the eternal flame that we call the fire of love. And it burns within every single human heart. And so let us connect heart to heart to heart. And gather all of us who are on this call today, weaving together a matrix that can hold the fire of love that burns now within our group heart. And from this place of interconnection and communion, we can now begin our journey together. Thank you. The work of Meditation Mount, as we've explained before, is to help create a new world based on a set of spiritual principles and soul qualities through the power of what we call unanimous and simultaneous group creative meditation. And for those of you who have participated in earlier broadcasts, you're familiar with these principles and these pathways, but there may be people who are new to the call. And so let me very briefly recap what they are. There are three main principles that we believe the new society, the new world, will be founded upon. The first is essential divinity, that says a spark of the one life, a spark of the Creator, lives inside the heart of all of creation, lives inside the heart of each one of us. Therefore, each one of us is sacred. And you could look to the Bhagavad Gita and one of the passages to amplify that. Having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, yet I remain. So that describes essential divinity. The second principle is that of goodwill. And goodwill is the presence and active agent of love. because love is the currency and lifeblood of all our relationships. And the third principle is one of unanimity, which says that we are interconnected and we are part of one seamless, indivisible web of life. And these three principles have connected to them three pathways. So essential divinity, the pathway connected with that principle is that of spiritual approach, which means that we choose any path to explore the true nature of ourselves. It could be a spiritual path, a religious path, an artistic path, a scientific path. It doesn't matter. It's whatever path we take to deepen our sense of self. And then the pathway that leads to goodwill is called right human relations. This is how we relate with each other, but it's more than that. It's how we as humans relate to the world around us, to all of nature, both the visible and invisible realm of nature. And then the third pathway that leads to unanimity is called group endeavor. So in order to realize this interconnected life, the way that we get it into our bones is by working together and really understanding through a lived experience that there is one life and all of us are aspects or fractals of that one life. So that's a brief recap of the principles and the pathways. So today we're going to be focusing on the role of creative meditation in this work of creating a new society, a new world, and particularly the function of the mind as a creative tool. And here at Meditation Mount, we have a 3-year course on creative meditation. And towards the end of our broadcast, we'll be posting links to the creative meditation page and to the page that contains these course materials. And what I'd like to do is to begin this session by reading some excerpts from the first booklet of the first year, just so you have a sense, because it really helps us understand the ancient axiom that energy follows thought. So let me read this and just let it sink into your heart and mind. In the world of the mind are born the practical beginnings of everything that eventuates on earth. From the architect's thinking before he or she makes blueprints, the industrialist surveying markets and the things they will produce, to the scientist seeking a new formula, from the world diplomat to the teacher in the little school, the warp and woof of everyday life is being woven out of thinking. The mind is a great creative instrument as well as a vital activator. Its vision links us with our higher possibilities, and through it we are able to probe the outer rim of our existing knowledge and catch sight of the world of meaning and values. This enables us to gather in the higher ideas of the true, the good, and the needed, bringing them down to everyday recognition and making them part of the fabric of life. Creative thinking is a definite stage of objectifying ideas and higher concepts. And because thought is an energy, we can use its power to develop the qualities, the attitudes, and the conditions that we think should prevail. If we use thought consciously and creatively, we can bring about changes in ourselves and our lives, and also can contribute to changes on a wider scale in our environment and in the world. Thought often plays through us unconsciously and haphazardly, and frequently it rides us instead of are controlling it, bringing worry and depression and sweeping us along with its own force. If we use it selfishly, it can even be destructive. Therefore, at the same time as we realize the power of thought, we must see the vital need for right thought, for right motive behind thought, and for right understanding of its subtle processes. So there you have an introduction to creative meditation. It's using the power of thought. And when we talk about the mind, today I'm going to say higher mind and lower mind. The higher mind is more of the intuitive faculty that can pick up the subtle signals from the cosmos, new ideas that are held within the planetary mind and planetary heart as the destiny and promise of Gaia, how we can then bring them through, and then through the concrete mind, create forms of expression for these. And so we are very familiar with the power of imagination. And imagination is like this quicksilver messenger that connects heaven and earth. And the theme for today is reimagining self and society, the art of inspired and right thinking. So we're going to be looking at how we use the mind creatively to give birth to something new, but also how we are mindful of the pitfalls of what happens when the mind controls us and we're not in control of the process of thinking. So when we say at Meditation Mount that we are creating a unanimous and simultaneous group around the world to meditate on the laws and principles, to saturate the ethers, to bring forward these ideas that live in the future and precipitate them into the present, we're really talking about creating a new web around the planet. We're creating, if you like, seed points of creativity around the world. And here's an image to illustrate that. Let me read what's on it. The points of entry on Earth through which genius can flow are those groups and individuals who are open to meet a need and through the quality of their lives act as magnetic seed points. So that's one of the reasons we work in groups, and we're creating these networks of like-minded and like-hearted people around the world, because as we create this grid, this matrix, it becomes a way in which we can harness, we can anchor, and then we can construct and build and form a new world. And so this is a network that we will be building and are building now, because this is work that requires group endeavor, which is one of the pathways. So if you imagine, and we'll leave this image for the moment, if you can imagine the higher mind, the intuitive mind, like a lens, and this lens is able to focus the universal and bring it to a point into a particular expression. So through our imagination, we can capture these greater impressions from the heart and mind of Gaia, and we can make sense of them. Because as we bring them in to our intuition, we start to create, if you like, the architectural blueprints, the subtle designs. And then when we hand it over to the concrete mind, it starts to flesh it out, and it takes form, and it becomes an embodied reality. So let's have a look at what it means for us to work with the collective mind as a lens. This is really a repeat of what I just said. The collective mind is a lens through which universality is focused in the particular. It's a creative bridge between heaven and earth that allows the timeless to be revealed in time and space. And that's the beauty of imagination. So there are some requirements associated with being able to function in this way. So how do we access the collective mind? How do we gain entry into it together? First of all, it goes back to this principle of unanimity, a recognition of the interdependency of all life. Because if we recognize that we are one with everything, then we're connected with everything, and there is no distance. Then there's a clear group agreement and commitment to serve a higher purpose, which is our focused intent. And when we serve a higher purpose, then our lives are elevated and we raise the ceiling level of possibility, because we're not just thinking in selfish terms of how we can serve ourselves through the power of thought. When we together agree to serve a higher purpose, such as the destiny of Gaia, then we become a powerful tool within the planetary body. Then thirdly, the ability to listen inwardly beyond the voices of fear and separation with the heart as well as the head. And we'll look more in depth at this later on in the program. The cultivation of faith in life as a way to create space for miracles to enter. This is the classic trust the process. And when we surrender to life, surrender doesn't mean giving up. Surrender is how we fall upwards together. And then here, fourthly, the ability to have one's head in the clouds while one's feet are planted firmly on the ground. This is simply a way of illustrating humanity's role of being a bridge between the invisible and the visible, between the realm of ideals and ideation and the realm of concretized form. So that was a quick review of that. So we're looking at the mind as a lens. And we're talking about meditation. And we're going to be looking at creative meditation. But many of us have our own meditation practice. And what I'd like to offer is one very simple illustration of what meditation is for me. So here on the left, we're unable to hear the song of the soul because there's so much noise, there's so much static. Whether we're creating it ourselves, it could be that we're in a particular traumatic situation in our lives, could be we're living in the middle of a city and it's noisy and we can't find a place of stillness. There may be many factors, but it's like there's a sound barrier that we can't penetrate. And so the art of meditation is to come into that still space, enter the living silence where the song of the soul is heard, or the song of the soul of Gaia is heard. So that's one way of looking at meditation. But meditation, when we talk about creative meditation, is really engaging the faculties of the higher mind and the lower mind to bring things about, to make things happen. So this is the ideal when the soul is in control. But what happens when the soul is not in control of our lives, as it often isn't? What happens when our mind dwells on worries and concerns and all the unresolved aspects of our emotional nature? What happens then? So when the emotions run rampant, they call upon the concrete mind and it becomes captured by these emotions. And these could be emotions of fear, irritation, low self-esteem, jealousy, whatever it is. And the mind then creates a world centered around these patterns and emotions. It's quite remarkable because it's as if we create our own reality. When we use the lens of the mind to receive impulses from the deeper dimensions of our own being and the deeper dimensions of Gaia, then we get this clear flow of inspiration through. But when we are emotionally traumatized and caught up, what happens is our higher mind is not engaged, but our lower mind is just remarkable at taking the emotions and creating a new narrative around the emotions, so that we tell ourselves and we create a story based on whether we feel a victim, whether we feel excluded, whatever it is. But that isn't our true self, our true nature. So let's have a look at some of the pitfalls of this. So here on the left, these two people are saying, I don't like you, you push my buttons. That means suddenly I have an emotional charge or a discharge based on my interaction with somebody else. And I'm blaming them for how I'm feeling. Now, if you magnify that by several billion people, you get a global situation. So what you have here when you push each other's buttons, here I've drawn this analogy to, you're actually pushing nuclear buttons, buttons of destruction. And as I've said before, these images were created in 1975 in the Findhorn community. And so some of them may have language that I would probably change, but I'm using them because for the most part, they still ring true. So this is what happens when our life is controlled by our emotions. We blame others, we don't take responsibility, and then we create our own individual reality that when it's magnified billions of times by other individuals, then we have a global situation. So imagine a number of you either play or have children who play, or cousins, nephews who play video games. And what is a video game? It's somebody's idea of a world that you create using computer-generated images. And people get fairly addicted to it. And they enter the game, and it sometimes becomes more real than the world outside, because the world outside sometimes is too hard to handle. So the video games are created with computer-generated images. What I want to put forward is that when the emotions are captured and take hold of us and employ the mind, it's like creating a video game of our life. And instead of computer-generated images, I'm going to call these mind-generated realities, MGRs. So imagine if you're hooked inside a video game, at the same time, you are living inside a world that you've created out of your fears, out of your doubts, out of your worries, out of your low self-esteem. It's going to be very difficult to access the power and potential and promise of your own soul. And that's why meditation is so important, because it helps bring us online with our soul. It helps bring us online with that which lies beyond the conditioning. It's the unconditional love of the soul. Now, many of you have heard the phrase, the mind is the slayer of the real. And that simply says the mind, when it isn't this pure lens that is bringing through the higher inspirations, then starts to tell us what's real and what's not real. It distorts the true reality. And if you go back to one of the most ancient prayers on the planet, which is the Gayatri, there is a line there that says, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from the unreal to the real. So my question is, so what's real? We're living in an age of misinformation, disinformation, fake news. I mean, can you even believe what I'm saying? And I'm not asking you to believe anything. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that it's a reasonable hypothesis I'm putting forward, and you need to go out and road test it yourself. You need to go and find resonance with your own relationship with life. But let's go back to this idea of reality. And I think it's come to a head in the last few years where there are people who believe that this is true, and another group believe the exact opposite. And there is no way for one group to convince another group that they're wrong. Because whatever their fears are, whatever their concerns are, whatever their doubts are, these have been turned into a program by the mind, and they've become this mind-generated reality. And that's a really tricky one to get out of. And that's what we're in the middle of now, which is why I believe it's so important for us to use the mind in its most benevolent fashion, which is to dream together a brighter future, and then to design it, and then to build it, and to make it real. So if I was to say, what is reality? I could say reality is life unconditionally experienced by the soul. So it's life on its own terms. It's not life as determined by my beliefs. And I think this is where we're all finding life to be difficult, because in the end, as I say, there is this need to let go and to come into resonance with a deeper truth, which lies beyond the concrete mind, which lies beyond belief systems. So the question is, are we as a human family creating a utopian or a dystopian vision of the future together? It's our choice. Because each of us is like a weather machine, very much so. So if we look at this next image, you can see we create like clouds around us, and it's easy to say, look, there is no sun or there is no soul. I don't believe in any higher power because I've never felt its warmth in my life. I've never seen it, because we've created the clouds of doubt that block us off from the illumination and from the warmth of our own soul. It becomes, if you like, a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so this is the thing, the power of mind is such that if I believe something implicitly, that it's going to be so, then I'm caught in this. And I prophesy it's going to be so. I prophesy my life's going to be a mess because, and then it becomes a mess, and I say, I told you so. What I don't want to have happen on our planet is that I told you so. I would like myself and us to wake up now, to listen to the song of Gaia, to listen to the song of the soul of our common humanity, and to bring through the beauty and the goodness and the truth that lives there, and to make it real on earth, to make it heaven on earth. Because the way that we can change prophecy is by changing how we affect the climate. So who is responsible for carrying out this change? So here's an image to give you an answer to that. If you want to know who's responsible and has the power to build a new world, just look in any mirror. Basically, we're saying it's us. There's no getting away from it. It's up to us to play our part in creating harmony, creating justice, creating beauty, creating a more joyful and just society. I've mentioned before Roberto Assagioli, and that he is the inspiration behind Meditation Mount and also behind many other centers in the world. It was his task that he took on back in 1950 to create groups that would be focusing on these principles and pathways and doing creative meditation. Well, in addition to that assignment, he was a great psychologist. He worked with Jung. He developed his own psychological model called psychosynthesis, which is a very progressive, transpersonal approach that includes the full spectrum of the human being. And one of the practices inside of psychosynthesis that Roberto Assagioli was really keen on was this continuous process of disidentification and then re-identification at a higher order. So once you let go and you empty, you have an opportunity to reach into a deeper dimension of who you are. It's very difficult to do that when you're conditioned. So what I'd like us to do now is to experience that and to go through a very simple process of disidentification. So this is the psychosynthesis disidentification practice. Very simple. So let's bring ourselves back into a quiet place. We can close our eyes if we wish. Become aware of living inside a body, feeling the blood course around the universe of self, sensing the feelings, bringing color and richness and flavor to our life. Becoming aware of our thoughts. And then we enter the stillness of the heart. And we make the following affirmation. I have a body for which I am responsible, and yet I am not my body. I have emotions for which I am responsible, and yet I am not my emotions. I have a mind for which I am responsible, and yet I am not my mind. I am that I am. So this is a way of taking a few minutes every now and again just to cleanse ourselves, to disidentify so that we can re-identify with the deep nature of ourself. And Roberto Assagioli liked to use a particular affirmation for the re-identification, and I'd like to use that now with us. It's called the affirmation of the self. So let's once more go into that quiet space that has now been washed clean through the process of disidentification. More radiant than the sun, purer than the snow, subtler than the ether is the self, the spirit within my heart. I am that self am I. We are that self are we. Thank you. For me, the beauty of that affirmation is that it doesn't give us concrete forms. It says, more radiant than the sun, purer than the snow. We have to go beyond the forms into the more subtle distinctions of what that is, subtler than the ether. And so we're invited to go beyond the mind and to sense into our essential divinity, one of the principles. And one of the approaches at Meditation Mount that we're really mindful of is that it is not our role to tell another person who they are. It's simply to affirm the essential divinity that lives within them. It's up to us then to develop the relationship with our own essential divinity. So we give birth to our own understanding of who we are, rather than somebody telling you, this is who you are. If you believe this, and if you read this, this is who you are. Essential divinity is a principle, and it's up to each of us to understand how that principle lives inside us. And in that way, we avoid packaging it as a belief system and offering it to another. And we often say at Meditation Mount, we have a mission, but we're not missionaries, which simply means that our role in life is to emphasize these three principles, because we believe the next society that will be healthy and whole needs to be built on these type of qualities and principles. So the idea is to have people around the world create these networks that can meditate together, because together we can harness the energy of the soul, just as we can harness through solar panels the energy of the sun. It's the same thing. It's solar power, S-O-U-L-A-R or S-O-L-A-R. It's the same thing. So we are able to harness the energy of the soul together and to bring that into daily life as a limitless source of love, light, warmth, nourishment. So this is what it means to be architects of the new, builders of a new world. It's not just some dream. We have to realize the dream. So what needs to happen? We have to join with each other, and we have to create, if you like, a critical mass that can change the psychological and spiritual climate of the world. And we've mentioned this before, is that one way to reforest a desert is to start by creating a little microclimate, a little stand of trees, and then another stand. And then these different microclimates starts to interact and they change the conditions so that you and I together can become these points for anchoring these microclimates of goodness, these microclimates of hope, and these microclimates of new possibilities. Which brings us back to the first image that we showed, which was the seed points of creativity. So to sum up the work that we do at Meditation Mount and other centers do around the world, is to join with others using the power of thought and the power of a loving heart to both dream and design like architects, and then to flesh it out with feelings and with more concretized thoughts and colors and shapes, so that we can precipitate on the outside what we sense to be the brighter future on the inside. I mentioned earlier that around the world, groups are meditating on the principles and pathways. And because there are 3 pathways, 3 principles, we do 2 months at a time. And so from February the 21st to April the 20th, we focus on the principle of goodwill. And I thought that it would be a nice way of closing this time together by having our closing meditation be a creative meditation on goodwill. And then we would take the energy that we have invoked and we would send it around the world as a blessing. Because that, if you like, is how we participate in this great circulation of energy, this great circulation of blessing. We receive, we give thanks, and we give out in blessing. So if we could just take a deep breath and re-enter the group field that we consciously created, that has been with us and has been strengthened by our time together. And we visualize this network of souls, each one of us joined heart to heart around the world, forming a chalice. And we will engage in an act of receptive meditation, which simply means that we now become receptive, like a chalice, waiting to receive. And into our chalice, we invoke the presence of goodwill. Goodwill as the active agent of divine love. May our group heart be filled with the presence of goodwill. And we feel ourselves enriched and nourished by this presence as it fills our chalice to the brim. And we realize the need in the world for goodwill, for acts of loving kindness. And so we will pour forth the blessings that we have received in our chalice out into the world. And we will sound the Tibetan singing bowl 3 times. And with each sounding, let us pour forth the power of love that is goodwill out into the world, seeing and sensing it touch and nourish all life on this planet. Thank you. So I think we realize the power of creative meditation. It's how we ensure that we create a utopian future and not a dystopian nightmare of this planet. So deeply grateful for your presence tonight. And let me close with a couple of announcements. On Sunday, March the 21st at 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, we're going to have the third in our series of Signs of Hope. And the guests are John Raymer, who's the founder of Compassion Games, and Becky Susich, who's the founder of Joyful Organization. And on Saturday, March the 27th at 6 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, we're going to gather for the full moon in the solar sign of Aries. So this starts the new year. So thank you so much for your presence and your participation. I know it's been a lot of words, but behind the words is a deep desire for us to come together and to create something more beautiful, more just, more joyful, because that's our destiny. And if we don't do it, who's going to? There's no excuse for not showing up. So thank you for showing up. And I look forward to when we meet next time. So from Meditation Mount, good night and many blessings.